A new premier takes office in the British Virgin Islands. Our top story in Caribbean Newsline for Tuesday, February 26th. From the CMC News Centre in Bridgetown, I'm Dawn Paris. Good evening. Andrew Foy was Tuesday sworn in as the new premier of the British Virgin Islands, a day after his Virgin Islands party, the VIP, won general elections. Official return results released by a supervisor of elections, Juliet Penn, show that the VIP won 8 of the 13 seats in the House of Assembly, 7 of them by first-time candidates, while the incumbent National Democratic Party managed to retain 3 seats. The Progressive Virgin Islands Movement and the Progressives United took 1 each. The VIP leader said his party intends to keep the promises that he believes won over the electorate.
Accountability, restore transparency, restore good governance, to make sure that the people of the Virgin Islands have a stake in the Virgin Islands, to make sure that we stop doing the people's business behind their backs and not including the people of the Virgin Islands, to ensure that all people can take some of the senior positions in this territory. And every time an interview is done, whether in statutory bodies or in government, is always that they're not qualified enough, and the positions go for more people, which is something that's unexplainable. To the land bank that we spoke about. We also spoke about the affordable home, and we spoke about agriculture, restoring, reviving agriculture and the seafood in terms of the fisheries and our economic plan and many other areas. We sold them, and the people of the Virgin Islands obviously gravitated towards them. Now it's up to us to go and get the job done.
He added that once his administration gets a full and true picture of the state of the economy, decisions can be made about how soon promises can be fulfilled.
I always promise the people of the Virgin Islands when we take office is that we have to see what the books are saying. And we said based on what the books are saying, then we can go and see which one of our plans are the low-lying fruits that can be done first. Because on the campaign, I always maintain that the finances are not how the government has been purporting it. So before I say anything else, we have to know what the books are saying.
But the premier, speaking there after his party won the election, said there would need to be a time of healing and forgiveness following a grueling campaign.
Well, first of all, we have to make sure that we turn to God and forgive each other. Because a lot of things happened in this campaign that it was, to me, one of the most negative campaigns that I've ever been involved in. And a lot of families and persons were hurt. A lot of persons were blamed, and they were innocent. And at the end of the day, we need to sit down, go to God in prayer, and just let the Virgin Islands know that this is not going to be a government just for VIP, and be a government for everyone.
Monday's general election was the first one in the BVI to use electronically tabulated voting instead of manual counting. The polls were held early after Premier Dr. Orlando Smith decided to forego a by-election for the 5th electoral district following the death of the representative for the area. Smith did not contest the polls. He had indicated in June last year that he would be stepping down and not running for office again. His successor, Myron Walwyn, did not win his seat, marking the first time in the BVI's history that the NDP leader is not sitting in the National Assembly. Another first was the use of the electronic tabulation to count ballots. CARICOM leaders began their 30th intersessional meeting in St. Kitts on Tuesday with a blistering condemnation of the financial services policies of the European Union and reiterating that Venezuelans alone must find a lasting solution to the ongoing political and economic crisis. Host Prime Minister and CARICOM Chairman Dr. Timothy Harris said the continuous addition of onerous requirements by the EU to comply with new regulations is tantamount to cruel and unusual punishment.
The EU and its member states are going well beyond the regulations and requirements of the OECD, of which they are a part and with which our countries are largely compliant. Further, the selective application of these strictures does not apply to everyone and has a distinct bias. These unbridled attacks on our sovereignty and disturbing intrusion in our internal affairs hark back to a different era of us having to heed the dictates of our colonial masters who imposed mercantile laws that restricted our development scope and space. The question that must be asked is this: why are the revenue earning measures of small states within the Caribbean community and elsewhere being deliberately targeted?
Regarding the unfolding situation in Venezuela, the CARICOM chairman said the 15-member regional grouping would maintain its position of non-interference. Opposition leader Juan Guaido, who's declared himself interim president, is leading the effort to remove President Nicolas Maduro from office, and he has the backing of the United States and several other Western countries. But Prime Minister Harris said CARICOM could be justifiably proud of its stance and efforts to help the people of Venezuela resolve their own crisis.
I have no doubt in my mind that the principled position taken by CARICOM, working with like-minded countries, has prevented so far a catastrophe on our borders. We will continue to urge that dialogue is the only way to achieve a lasting solution.
Meantime, the Movement for Social Justice, MSJ, and several trade unions in Trinidad and Tobago on Monday held a march outside the U.S. Embassy and the European Union in support of the Venezuelan president. MSJ political leader David Abdullah insists Venezuela should be allowed to fix its own issues. CNC3's Otto Carrington tells us more.
Chanting their support for Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, the Movement for Social Justice and leaders from the Joint Trade Union Movement protested outside the U.S. Embassy and the European Union Commission buildings. The pro-Maduro march began at the Venezuelan Embassy and then made its way to Marley Street. Political leader of the Movement for Social Justice, David Abdullah, is calling for world leaders to desist from taking any military action against Venezuela.
We reiterate the call for there to be a zone of peace. This is a zone of peace declared by CARICOM, declared by the Association of CARICOM States. And we reiterate we want peace in this region. We want no war. We want no military warfare.
Abdullah is also condemning the $100 million U.S. aid initiative at the border, which led to riots and the loss of lives. He says Venezuela does not need aid, but needs the sanctions against them by the U.S. and European Union lifted.
Over now to the Cayman Islands. Premier Alden McLaughlin says he will lead the charge for independence should the United Kingdom seriously consider non-Caymanians standing for office. He was responding to the release of a UK parliamentary report called Global Britain and the British Overseas Territories, Resetting the Relationship. That report calls for an overhaul of voting rights, setting a date for legalizing same-sex marriages, and implementing public beneficial ownership registers by 2020. McLaughlin says he found the report shameful because it seeks to impose a new era of neo-colonialism on the overseas territories.
The day the UK government seriously considers that persons who are not Caymanians can stand for office here is the day, if I'm still able and alive, I lead the charge for independence.
Premier Alden McLaughlin talking tough after the Foreign Affairs Committee's report calls for a resetting of the relationship between Britain and her overseas territories.
I think it demonstrates a lack of regard for the nature of the constitutional relationship and, as I said, for the significant autonomy which have been given to territories like the Cayman Islands, autonomy which we are hoping to increase.
The report was published on Thursday night. It was the culmination of an inquiry into the future of the relationship. It calls for removal of belongership, setting a date for legalizing same-sex marriages and implementing public beneficial ownership registries by 2020. And of the three, there's one the Premier will not stand for.
From my standpoint, were the UK government to insist that non-Caymanians were able to stand for office here, I think that would be a breaking point in the relationship.
A breaking point Mr. McLaughlin believes could spark a push for independence.
And if I am around at that time, I would certainly lead the charge for independence. I think that would be what really pushed us over the line, because it would be a clear indication of an attempt to take over the territory by persons who do not have any real and vested interest in the territory.
He cautions not to set too much store by the report, since the UK government is not obliged to accept it.
It's not a government committee. It is merely recommendations to the government, which the government can accept or not accept or ignore as the case may be. So I know everybody is a bit exercised about this, but I would caution people not to get too overly concerned about it. It is not the view of the government.
He stresses in his talks with the UK government the report's stance is not matched.
The report does not reflect the current UK government's position with respect to these matters. Hence, I'm not being flippant, but I really am not according the report a great deal of importance.
Cayman Islands Premier Alden McLaughlin ending that report from Cayman 27 News. Still to come in Caribbean Newsline, Bermuda to see debt fall for the first time in almost 2 decades. The details of that story and more after the break. Stay with us.
Okay guys, so we have cut up the onion, the shallots and stuff like that, the pepper. We have everything ready and we are ready to cook now. We've also grated the coconut and added the water, ready to squeeze into this head of leaf. So that's the onions there. The shallots.
Welcome back. Bermuda's Premier David Burt says the island's $2.4 billion debt is set to fall for the first time in 16 years. His announcement on Monday followed Friday's presentation of the 2019-2020 budget, which Burt says is set to be balanced for the first time since 2003. We get more in this report from ZBM News.
Premier Burt said we have economic challenges, but yet government can announce its first budget surplus in 16 years.
This is the first balanced budget in 16 years. Debt will fall this time for the first time since 2003. We will provide mortgage relief for Bermudian families, and we will fund our new College Promise programs that will allow students in public school who have a 3.0 GPA to receive scholarships through Bermuda College. There are increased investments in education, which is our priority, and also training to make sure that more Bermudians are ready to fill the jobs of the future. There are investments in social programs to tackle the root causes of violence in our communities. And then finally, there's payroll tax relief for retailers and local musicians.
Finance Minister Dickinson made it clear that they will no longer be trying to raise an additional $50 million in revenue.
And as stated in the budget statement, we've concluded that it was not prudent to raise an additional $50 million in revenue at this time. Additionally, the government has suspended the mandatory annual contribution to the sinking fund rather than borrow additional monies to make this annual contribution. In the 2019-2020 budget statement, we'll create conditions to foster economic growth, which will increase jobs, increase income, and raise the standard of living for Bermudians. The highlights of the 2019-2020 budget feature a 0.4% decrease in total expenditure of $4.3 million from last year's original estimate.
Stakeholders in Jamaica's fisheries industry are facing an environmental dilemma: save the conch industry or lose millions of dollars in exports. Government has placed a ban on the harvesting and export of conch from March 1st, 2019 to January 31st, 2020 to allow the population to replenish itself. But local businesses fear they could face significant losses after investing heavily to upgrade processing facilities to meet the standards for exporting to the European market. We get more in this report from TVJ News.
Fishing, at least in the local sense.
And while stakeholders agree that the resources are in fact depleted, they still argue that there's some missing information from the government.
I have not seen anything in the media or in any of the declarations from either fisheries or the ministry on what is going to be done about dealing with the illegal fishing.
General Manager at Rainforest Seafoods, Jerome Miles, says stakeholders are taking a leap of faith, knowing that export markets could be gone by the time the close season ends.
There's a grave danger that when we, at whatever time, are able to re-enter the market, our markets may have been filled by others. So that's a big risk that is out there for the Jamaican conch industry.
Mr. Miles says jobs could also be hanging in the balance.
It is going to have a devastating impact on members of the industry. Rainforests may be able to weather it to some extent because we are broader than just conch, but there are players in the industry that have invested heavily in both equipment, boats, plants that will have idle capacity. Not to mention the numbers of people that are employed in the industry. So it will have a significant impact on incomes of a lot of people in Jamaica.
The ban will start on March 1 and will remain in effect until January 31 next year. During this period, it will be illegal for any person to sell, process, or import conch meat.
Ahead in Newsline Sport, the West Indies head coach looking for a greater team effort going into the 4th ODI against England. We'll be right back.
You have a case like this, you obviously the defendants are going to be the doctors, the hospital, etc. What was the legal strategies you pursued to try and, get success for this case?
Well, the first thing you have to do is establish what are the standards of care. Doctors can't just do what they want. There are standards, minimum standards of care that they're supposed to follow. And there's a rule of medicine called differential diagnosis. You have to rule out the worst first.
Don't jump up to this non-stop turn and twist.
What up, it's your boy French Montana.
It's me, Smokey Robinson.
It's your boy David Doe.
Hi, I'm Elme.
This is Bucci Banton and I'll be performing live for the Shiloh Band in St. Kitts Music Festival.
Don't miss the 23rd Annual St. Kitts Music Festival, June 26th to June 30th, 2019. Featuring Bucci Banton, Smokey Robinson, Popcorn, and Elme. Also, Davido, French Montana, Fimba, Edwin Yearwood and Crossfire, Coco T, Skinny Fabulous, Shal Marshall, Charlie Black, Farmer Nappy, Nadia Batson, Infamous, New Vibes Band, and many, many more. It will be epic. It will be mind-blowing. It will be jaw-dropping. It will be awesome. The St. Kitts Music Festival, an experience like no other. For more information and to buy tickets, log on to www.stkittsmusicfestival.com.
This is unbelievable. Look at this water. It's like you're in the Caribbean. So come to Ipswich, get a hotel, go to the bed and breakfast, go get a roast beef sandwich over Pomodoros. Do what you're gonna do, but this is unbelievable. Oh no, wait, we are in the Caribbean. Oh my God, that's a good fish. You got another one? Hey, Stevie the Striper.
What's your perspective on this, and what are some of the names you would suggest as names to look out for the future?
Replicated, and we can go even lower in terms of the time. I'm expecting Christopher Taylor to do a 9.52. I'm expecting Tyreek Wilson to even go further, possibly a 9.50. We have a beautiful, awesome set of youngsters.
Continuing with sports now, West Indies interim head coach Richard Pybus says the Caribbean men hope to use their next assignment in the Tri-Nation Series in Ireland and their tour of the UK to polish up areas of concern before the World Cup. West Indies have levelled the current ODI series against England and will be hoping for a win in the fourth ODI on Wednesday. Speaking after the aborted third ODI on Monday, Pybus said he expects to see greater team effort in the next assignments.
I think we're very clear on what we need to work on. So, I mean, ideally in this series, you want to win every game. We want to win the series. We're clear on that. It doesn't necessarily work out like that in the real world. So, but we know what we need to work on, and we're not really too hung up on the outcomes. I think coming out of the series, being clear, we've got a triangular in Ireland. There'll be a few lads away at the IPL. So I think we'll have a very strong sense of having been able to assess where we are, what we need to polish up in Ireland, and any key last steps in the UK before the World Cup.
Pybus was also happy to see Andre Russell return to the squad.
It's great having him in the setup. Obviously, he's one of a kind. Adds greater depth. We've got some great all-rounders in the squad, and that's always lovely because that's competition for spots. So that keeps everybody honest. Yeah, I can't.
Meanwhile, Pybus believes veteran opener Chris Gayle has made a resounding case for his inclusion in the World Cup squad later this year. Gayle emphatically announced his return to the Caribbean side following a 7-month break, slamming his 24th one-day 100 in the opening match of the ongoing 5-match ODI series against England. But pundits have questioned his commitment and fitness. But Pybus said the 39-year-old would be an enormous asset to the West Indies side for the May 30th to July 14th showpiece in England.
I can't speak on behalf of the selectors, but I think he's put forward a very resounding case. He's just class, really. He's a little bit like Andre, is one of a kind. It's always great having guys in your side who are quite scary for the opposition, knowing full well what they can deliver. So he's been fantastic. He's been great with the younger lads.
Well, critics of Gayle's game point to his aversion to running singles and slow starts in the first power play, two crucial elements of the one-day game. Pybus said he's not worried by Gayle's approach, as the Jamaican possessed the ability to easily adapt his game.
Chris can play both games. I think that, he would, in those first two games, I think he was really just getting the feel for quite a spongy wicket, batting first. For those who know Barbados, it can be a game of two halves, really. That morning or that early session can be very different to the match later on. So I think he was just playing himself through. I mean, you guys know, Lady knows from T20s, Chris can attack that first power play brutally. So, and I think him just getting it back into the squad and settling down, I think, on good wickets, he'll be going hard pretty early.
Off-spinning all-rounder Moeen Ali will join Ben Stokes and Joss Butler on the sidelines for the 3-match T20 series against West Indies after being granted time off. The 31-year-old, a key member of the England squad in all formats, featured in all 3 tests and both one-day internationals of the ongoing series. He's been replaced by fast bowling all-rounder Sam Curran, who played in the 2 opening tests against the Windies with limited success. The 20-year-old is yet to make his T20 debut for England. Rest for the trio comes ahead of their campaign in the lucrative Indian Premier League, which bowls off March 23rd. Ali will turn out for the Royal Challengers Bangalore, while Stokes and Butler will feature for Rajasthan Royals. Curran will be making his IPL debut in the upcoming season after being signed by Kings 11 Punjab. Opener Jason Roy, currently a part of the ODI series, will also miss the Windies T20s as he's set to return home for the birth of his first child. England faced West Indies in the opening T20I in St. Lucia on March 5th before heading to St. Kitts for the final two matches on March 8th and 10th. Ricky Skerritt has hit back at comments made by Cricket West Indies President Dave Cameron, cautioning the region's lead cricket administrator not to make the issue of turmoil central to the upcoming election campaign. Skerritt, a former tourism and sports minister, is challenging Cameron for the CWI presidency at elections scheduled for March 24th in Jamaica. In a radio interview during the second one-day international against England in Barbados last week, Cameron had said while Skerritt had done a lot as minister in St. Kitts, what he was best remembered for was his period as West Indies team manager and the turmoil that occurred during those years. Skerritt said in a statement on Monday, quote, "If Cameron wants to talk about turmoil, perhaps he can explain why former head coaches Otis Gibson, Phil Simmons and the several others who Cameron hastily and summarily dismissed from both the men's and women's teams have collectively cost CWI well over $1 million US, end quote. As far as his tenure as Windies manager was concerned, Skerritt said it was a period of a relative success, unlike the present era of West Indies cricket. And that's sports. We'll be right back.
Caribbean Newsline is brought to you by the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inn.
Again, the major developments of this day: Andrew Foy sworn in as the new Premier of the British Virgin Islands a day after his Virgin Islands party won general elections. And in sport, West Indies interim head coach Richard Pybus looking for a greater team effort going into the fourth ODI against England and other assignments. And that's Caribbean Newsline. For news and sport around the clock, subscribe to CanonNews.com, and for more of our programming, log on to caribvision.tv and check out our YouTube channel. We'll be back here again tomorrow, but from all of us at CMC News, thank you for watching and have yourselves a good night.